every news story, there's more.
So we can write the best security architecture plan, but it remains an essay until it becomes manifest on ground.
More detail.
Every time you are doing reform, even when we were doing it 2006, 2007, the question is also that it's not the right time. When will be the right time?
More than just the headline. This is News Extra on Radio Now 95.3 FM.
Hello and welcome to News Extra here on Radio Now 95.3 FM, Lagos. Today's conversation looks to Europe and the rest of the world that is expectant ahead of US President Donald Trump's meeting with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky and other European leaders. This meeting comes after the US President met with Russia's leader Vladimir Putin to discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine. Putin agreed to freeze the front lines of the war if Ukraine cedes territory to his country and insist that a peace deal should be agreed to without a prior ceasefire. For more on this, we are joined by geopolitical analyst Irina Sukerman. Ms. Sukerman, thank you for joining us on News Extra.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us on the conversation. So to get right into it, even before this meeting with Ukraine and the European contingent, the US president had posted on social media that NATO membership and reclaiming Crimea are off the table. How do you expect the European visitors to react?
Well, they've made it very clear that they present a united front with President Zelensky, that they are fully in support of Ukraine's territorial integrity, which of course includes Crimea. And as for NATO membership, of course, US can oppose it for the next 3.5 years, but Trump has no control over what happens afterwards. Regardless, until all the territories are fully liberated, that would be against the current NATO rules. So unless that changes, this is not a question that needs to be decided immediately. But the issue of Crimea is not something that Trump can enforce other than through creating incentives for either side. This is a decision that Ukraine has to make, and according to its constitution, the president has no right to relinquish territories that are occupied by a foreign power.
And yet, as we understand it, part of what was discussed in his meeting with the Russian president was the ceding of territory in Luhansk and Donetsk. Do you think there's a likelihood that, I don't know, if there's no likelihood that Ukraine will cede these territories, then really what is the point to a discussion around a peace deal and a ceasefire?
Really isn't any point. And quite frankly, Trump undercut his own leverage by not inviting Zelensky right away to the meeting with Putin and cutting Ukraine out of the initial discussions. That actually ensured that the gap in the positions between the two countries grows, and Putin treated that meeting as a deal between the US and Russia rather than a deal between Russia and Ukraine. In fact, Trump is already, before even meeting with Zelensky and the European leaders, is already pushing for a trilateral summit between US, Putin, and Zelensky on August 22nd. But I'm not sure what point there is going to be to that if the Kremlin does not change its position. Zelensky already stated that he would only have a discussion with Putin if Russia had agreed to serious territorial concessions, which is likely not going to be the case.
And yet, considering what you said and also considering the circumstances on the ground, it doesn't seem like Ukraine has what it takes to continue this war for another 3.5 years. There's also the fact that if we consider the first term of Donald Trump as president, some of his foreign policy, if you like, diversions from what was traditional American foreign policy were somewhat maintained by the Democratic President Joe Biden. Is there a likelihood that we will see some sort of retention of his approach towards Russia after 3.5 years, or is that too long to wait?
would say it's more accurate to say that Russia doesn't have what it takes to fight another 3.5 years. Russia is actually in a worse position after 3.5 years than Ukraine. It is true that Ukraine suffered significant economic damage and human losses, but Russia lost approximately 1 million people. Its military has been decimated. Its equipment has been largely destroyed. Its entire Black Sea fleet has been sunk. It's relying on outdated old vehicles for transportation. Now, with Iran suffering destruction from the airstrikes, its delivery of drones has slowed down significantly. Its own economy has been damaged, and the only thing resuscitating it has been, ironically, Donald Trump and Putin's and the markets roaring after Putin's invitation to Alaska. And Russia has lost the territory it's occupied from approximately 27% to approximately 20%. And it has not been able to advance since then. It's essentially at a stalemate, losing human waves after human waves during this entire, as it's trying to inch its way back forward. So things are not looking particularly good for Russia. For Ukraine, they're actually looking better because it has started receiving significantly more aid, and it's developed its own defense industry and has been quite innovative in its applications. It's also diversifying its alliances across the board. So I wouldn't say that Ukraine's chances are bad at all. In fact, they're much better now than they were 3.5 years ago. As far as Trump is concerned, of course, he has had to vacillate quite a lot in his positions, but the one thing that's been consistent is that he has at every corner tried to assist Putin with not losing face, with surviving economically, politically, and militarily, and not allowing Ukraine to pursue a decisive course to victory. Only now that could change, that he finally has allowed Europeans to at least purchase U.S. weapons to share with Ukraine, and that could be a game changer in advancing Ukraine much further. But we are seeing that even without that assistance, Ukraine has managed a very significant military coup, such as Operation Spiderweb, and you never know who finally decides to show leadership in the face of a growing Russian threat to European security, and actually step forward with significantly greater push in support of Ukraine in the near future. So far, the European leadership has fallen short among some of the economies there, but that could change.
So beyond the optics of these 5-6 European leaders who are coming with the Ukrainian president, what else do you expect to be different? Some sort of new outcome from this meeting that could shift the narrative forward?
I don't think that we should expect radical changes. Quite frankly, I think we've reached a point where Trump feels he has to dig in to save face because he has run out of leverage. The fact that the meeting with Putin was cut short on Friday just indicates that Trump had no way to force Putin to concede to U.S. conditions. I think Zelensky understands that very well and is also in no position to make concessions of the sort that Putin is demanding of him, nor does he particularly care to, because Russia is not a reliable counterpart. Any security guarantee Secretary Rubio mentioned, supposedly in revising Russian constitution to avoid any further entanglements, are unlikely to be kept. Russia has violated every major agreement it has made with other countries in the past. So there's absolutely nothing to stop Putin from resuming hostilities as soon as he finds it convenient, as soon as he regroups even if Ukraine made all the concessions that he demands. So the current trajectory is not particularly optimistic. The only thing that could change is Europeans showing a united front with Ukraine, preventing another fiasco, diplomatic fiasco of the sort we observed in the White House in February, when Zelensky was left one-on-one to be ambushed by Trump and J.D. Vance, and to show that they are serious about moving forward with supporting Ukraine's sovereignty. What that could mean in practice is finally dedicating sufficient, a proposal for collective security, finally stopping the hiding behind the technicalities, releasing frozen Russian assets to Ukraine to be used for purchase of weapons. Those are the types of things we are talking about, and absolutely, and using the funds dedicated to collective defense to mass produce ammunition that is badly needed both by Ukraine and these European countries as soon as possible. If any of that ends up being articulated during today's meeting, Trump may finally get a sense that Europe is serious about taking the lead on this issue and has something to bargain over.
So, Ms. Sukerman, there's a bit of a picture that's been painted in this conversation with Ukraine almost being the center of a tug of war between the U.S. and Europe. Now, with the position that we've seen European leaders take, I wonder if you can speak to, I guess, the broader significance, particularly for the U.S. over the course of the next few years, their decision to cut some of the funding that goes to NATO, the positions that they've taken in this war, and with the growing, I guess, support for Ukraine by Europe seems to present a different picture than we had a few years ago. How do you think all this will play out over the course of the next few years?
Well, it seems that Trump is increasingly more inclined to withdraw at least some of the forces from Europe and to cut funding. So far, that has not materialized into anything concrete. So far, the narrative has been that he's trying to push Europe into becoming more serious about its own collective security. And also, increasingly, there is a concern that under a new paradigm, U.S. could lose major contracts with Europe, and they could also lose access to vital intelligence sharing. We're already seeing some of the impact of these policies on the fact that several European countries have moved away from the idea of purchasing the F-35s, which Trump has criticized, but which nevertheless are a major defense opportunity for the U.S. in terms of strengthening and creating an alliance with Western countries. And they're looking towards becoming more independent of U.S. military purchases in general, which may take a while, and I don't think that will be that we will see a complete in the near future, but the fact that this is even being talked about in itself is fairly actually damaging for the relations. Another aspect of it is that U.S. has terminated cybersecurity offensive attacks against Russia with the European allies. That is also taking a toll on NATO's collective security. That, however, doesn't mean that Europe has no options of its own. It means that U.S. is losing an opportunity to lead. And, if countries like Germany, that were supposed to be kept at bay from becoming too aggressive by this Pax Americana, they now have an opportunity to change that lead once again. Now, the question, of course, what happens if different parties less are concerned about liberal order, liberal values, and democratic norms come to power in countries like France, Germany, even the United Kingdom? What happens if, under those circumstances, these countries are pushing for more aggressive posture, and if they replicate Trump's own willingness to threaten allies, not just with tariffs, but a territorial takeover. We're talking about Canada and Greenland. What if everyone starts doing that? Are we talking about a new chaos in Europe, a possibility of future wars resuming between European countries after 75 years of relative stability? And with Russia and its renewed aggressive push in Europe, are we talking about a potential for a World War III, or at least a proliferation of flashpoints that create an incredibly threatening and chaotic environment? All of that is on the table unless those differences are resolved.
Ms. Sukerman, thank you for your time and expertise on this conversation. Irina Sukerman is a geopolitical analyst and our guest on News Extra today, speaking to the current situation in Europe, where the 3.5-year war between Russia and Ukraine continues, even as European leaders join with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky ahead of a visit to the U.S. and a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. That's News Extra on Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. We urge you to stay tuned to your Beyond the News station